This fragment, The Hunt, is based on the early Welsh prose tale called Culhwch and Olwen, a large part of which is concerned with the hunting of the great boar called the Trwyth across the whole of southern Wales by Arthur and all the war bands of Britain with the help from across the Channel. The Dwrch Trwyth or Porcus Troit is in fact a king changed by God into the form of a boar because of his evil deeds. So the story might be called the Moby Dick of Welsh legend. The Hunt. And the 120s of horsed Palatini, to each comitatus one pentile, that closely hedge with a wattle of weapons, the first among equals from the wattled palassi, that talked Arglwyddi of calamitous jealousy. If there were riders from the faithful fetterlocked war band, there were riders also from the three faithless war bands, the riders who received the shaft shock in place of their radiant lords, the riders who slipped the column, whose lords alone received the shafts. When the men of proud spirit and the men of mean spirit, and the named and the unnamed of the island, and the name-bearing steeds of the island, and the dogs of the island, and the silent lords and the lords of loud mouth, the leaders of familiar visage from the dear known sights, and the adjuvant stranger lords, with aid for the hog hunt from over the sleeve, and the wand-bearing lords that are kin to Feryllt, who learned from the Sibyl the changed date and the turn of time, the lords who ride after deep consideration, and the lords whose inveterate habit is to ride, the riders who ride from interior compulsion, and the riders who fear the narrow glances of the kindred, those who would stay for the dung bailiff's daughter, and those who would ride, though the shining martres 3 by 3 sought to stay them. The riders who would mount, though the green wound unstitched, and those who would leave their mounts in stall if the bite of a gadfly could excuse them. The innate Cambrogies by father, by mother, without mixed, without broken, without mean descent, all the lords from among the co-equals and the quasi-free of limited privilege, whose insult price is unequal, but whose limb price is equal, for all the disproportion as to comeliness and power, because the dignity belonging to the white limbs and innate in the shining members annuls inequality of status and disallows distinctions of appearance. When the free and the bond and the mountain mares and the fettled horses and the fourpenny curs and the hounds of status in the wide jewelled collars, when all the shining Ara rode, with the diademed leader who directs the toil, whose face is furrowed with the weight of the enterprise, the lord of the conspicuous scars, whose visage is fouled with the hogspittle, whose cheeks are fretted with the grime of the hunt toil. If his forehead is radiant like the smooth hill in the lateral light, it is corrugated like the defences of the hill, because of his care for the land and for the men of the land. If his eyes are narrowed for the stress of the hunt and because of the hog, they are moist for the ruin and for love of the recumbent bodies that strew the ruin. if his embroidered habit is clearly from a palace wardrobe, it is mired and rent, and his bruised limbs gleam from between the rents, by reason of the excessive fury of his riding, when he rode the close thicket, as though it were an open lawn. Indeed, was it he riding the forest ride, or was the tangled forest riding? For the thorns and flowers of the forest, and the bright elm shoots, and the twisted tanglewood of stamen and stem clung and meshed him, and starred him with variety, and the green tendrils gartered him, and briary loops galloon him, with splinter spike and broken blossom twining his royal needlework, and ruby petal points counter the countless points of his wounds. And from his lifted cranium, where the priced tresses, dragged with sweat, stray his straight brow furrows under the twisted diadem, to the numbered bones of his scarred feet, and from the saturated forelock of his maned mare to her streaming flanks, and in broken festoons for her quivering fetlocks, he was caparisoned in the flora of the woodlands of Britain, and like a stricken Numen of the woods he rode, with the trophies of the woods upon him, who rode for the healing of the woods, and because of the hog. Like the breast of the cock thrush that is torn in the hedge war, when bright on the native mottle the deeper mottling is, and brighting the diversity of textures, and crystal bright on the delicate fret, the clear dewdrops gleam. So was his dappling, and his dreadful variety, the speckled lord of Prydain in his twice-embroidered coat, the bleeding man in the green. And if through the trellis of green, and between the rents of the needlework, the whiteness of his body shone, so did his dark wounds glisten. And if his eyes, from their scrutiny of the hog-track, and from considering the hog, turned to consider the men of the host, so that the eyes of the men of the host met his eyes, it would be difficult to speak of so extreme a metamorphosis. When they paused at the check, when they drew breath, and the sweat of the men of the host and of the horses salted the dew of the forest floor, and the hard breathing of the many men and of the many dogs and of the horses woke the fauna cry of the great forest and shook the silent flora, and the extremity of anger alternating with sorrow on the furrowed faces of the Ara transmogrified the calm face of the morning, as when the change wind stirs and the colours change in the boding thunder calm, because this was the day of the passion of the men of Britain, when they hunted the hog, life for life,